Hello my friends, let's start this one from the front lines updates. Russia performed several of the attack attempts in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. All of them failed. You can see those symbols of the Russian burning cars and even unmanned ground vehicle. Yeah, we have the confirmation. This is the vehicle itself. Yeah, we have the video also. Yeah, the video is just a compilation with lots of the Russian convoys, Russian soldiers, and here is the kaboom of this unmanned ground vehicle that was delivering some of the ammunition to the Russian positions. Yeah, here's the better picture. It was geolocated. The robot was on the way to supply the Russian group in Grishina village. As you can see, it's in a gray zone. And Russians, because they're out of the supplies and all of the attempts, even using bots, they are useless. Well, Russians had to surrender to Ukrainians. Also inside Pokrovsk itself, Russia managed to get to the central area of the town, and this is the very fresh videos. Yeah, you can see the snow, geolocated, some of the Russian Lada, maybe. Yeah, it's Lada vehicle with trailer, and it was chased and hit by FPV. And here's the same direction a little bit more to the south, Pokrovsk, and here's the video of one more vehicle, again with the trailer, and some of the Russian soldiers, they were hit as well. And before Russians tried to advance with their convoys also in Mirnograd, but all of the attacks, they basically failed. So even on a red zone, it's the usual thing that Russia has losses. The actual gray area is something like that, at least 10 up to 20 kilometers long. Ukraine operates with the fiber optic control drones, standard drones elsewhere. Russians also try to go to Rodinsk with their all-terrain vehicles, maybe? Oh no, those are the standard bikes. As you can see, they advance very close to the cemetery for them not to walk far away. And this is kaboom, kaput. One of the bikes lost here, the other one proceeded to the other road and also was hit. Yeah, this is the kaboom. Later on, Russians tried to go with a quad bike, but they were nailed as well. Some of the Predator visual style edition. Ukraine is very successful here. Okay, I already shared this one on my Telegram channel. This is the secret weapon of the Russian army, a portable penguin suit that allegedly, what? Should it mask the Russian soldier here? I guess it should cause just the hysterical laugh of the drone operator, so he might miss the Russian soldier. Yeah, this video is just hilarious, but it didn't end well good for this Russian penguin soldier, of course. We just have this distant thermal camera video, which I may show you on this platform, but I already shared the close perspective actual video of the guy. And this penguin, I would say, it lost the head, and you may check out it on my Telegram channel in the video description right below. I mean, that particular video. Remember this meme with Donald Trump and penguin that was shared by the White House official account, embrace the penguin, but the fact that no penguins are living in Greenland. They're in the southern hemisphere, not in Greenland. So that meme evolved into this one. Probably that's the only penguin Donald Trump may take to Greenland with him. Yeah, for me it's kind of strange why this Russian penguin was deployed out there to the open field in this kind of the masking suit. Maybe some of the local Russian commander decided to check out this new suit, whether Ukrainian drone operators might spot Russian soldier or not, about the thermal trace and whatsoever. Well, as you may see on the video, it is very evident that this is the Russian soldier in some sort of the new penguin suit, and this soldier also very well visible in a thermal camera. So it didn't work, and probably this Ivan was spoiled. Bring another one just to make sure that the suit is not working. But even if Russians use the standard military suits, they're also visible. I don't know why this guy went open, like he's the only person in this open field. Why not to take this tree line on the background, you know, to go through it, then jump to one bush, then other one. No, he decided to go straight forward, and he is very well visible. Even in the winter uniform, it doesn't hide him completely. So yeah, I have to put some of the censorship here to hide all of the debris, but this is the strike. It was very precise, and the rest of the Russian soldier was spread around the vast area. Maybe that is how they take the ground in Ukraine. I see lots of those attacks with just single Russian soldiers. Not even attacks, they just advance further. It's so-called infiltration tactics, but in 99% of the cases, they end up just like that, because they're very well visible in the thermal cameras, especially during the winter time. Alright, this video I can show you just this part, my friends, I'm sorry. So this is the Russian soldier. There are two of those. They're being strapped to the tree, one upside down and the other one in normal position, vertical. Judging on the video, the guy with the head down is probably gone already, but they refused to fight. They decided not to go to the mid-wave attack, and the destiny for them, well, they are flatlined in any sort of the case. This is how the Russian army motivates its soldiers to go on those useless attacks that end you know how. So in Pokrovsk, Russia is upscaling the attacks, but so far without visible success. In Novopavlovka, there was an attempt of Russians to go through Filia with just infantry forces. We have this new video. Well, here it was the Russian infantry attack that managed to advance further than with their attack convoy before. They went here 3 days ago, and this is just the day before yesterday or maybe yesterday. In Zaporizhzhia direction, Russia tries to propel forward. This is the Ural truck, which was converted to assault vehicle that they lost. I guess I filmed about it 2 days ago, and here they expanded this gray zone with their infiltration attack attempts. But it doesn't mean that they've took all of those villages under control before they managed to get to Alexeyevka and Oristopil, but were kicked out from those settlements. Konstantinivka direction, mostly drone operation, but without any significant changes for today. Alright, in Kupiansk, Ukraine performed some of the assault operation. We have this information shared by our OSINTs. One more GoPro video, it means that there are less and less of the Russian positions inside the city center. Here Russians are just cut from supplies, nevertheless they try to offend to cut this road for Ukraine. So far unsuccessful. This attack attempt happened maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Nevertheless, they tried to reach Kurilivka with similar infiltration attacks, but also not successful. What is this? Targeted very far away from the front lines. Russian armored vehicles hit with explosives dropped by heavy bomber. Yeah, Russia just stored their vehicles there, some of the MRAPs even, and this is BMP. And later on they were spotted and bombed by Ukrainian Baba Yaga or vampire drones. Awesome! In Luhansk Oblast, Ukraine hit some of the ammunition facility of the Russian army. This is the small ammunition depot. Yeah, here is the picture. Something is definitely burning there. And this is probably Zaporizhzhia direction. Russians tried to send some of the backup with their soldiers, just infantry advancement, and yeah, they were spotted by Ukrainian drones. Especially at night, especially thermal traces, they're very, very well visible. Yeah, the guys from the 5th Separate Assault Brigade, Kiev Brigade, they perform fantastic job here too. So Russian generals, they cannot fulfill the task that was set to them by Putin. Local commanders, they're also in desperate because they receive orders that they cannot commit, like it's physically not possible, and that's why they're coming up with some of the, as they think, solutions, like for example penguin suits or small toilet tents. Attacking Ukrainian positions on the horses, they're basically in desperate because breaking Ukrainian defense, then the drone kill zone is being created, it's simply not an easy task, yeah? So they need lots and lots of the reinforcements, like tons of the new infantry for them to just zombie storm Ukrainian positions with massive, absolutely crazy crowd, and maybe that is how Russians could reach some of the settlements, but now, no, they are stopped. Alright, to the other news. Today, 27 of EU member states formally adopted the regulation on phasing out Russian imports of both pipeline gas and the LNG to the European Union. It is very important because, for example, Belgium, they increased the consumption of the Russian gas the last year. Not only they're blocking confiscation of the Russian assets, but they're purchasing more of the Russian fossil fuels. But they'll have to stop the Russian gas according to the decision agreed by most of the European states. Well, Slovakia is also against and they want to sue European Commission. For sure they will not be successful. So a ban will take effect on LNG imports from the beginning of 2027 and for pipeline gas imports from autumn 2027. That's the great news from one side, but it also means that entire 2026 Europe will continue to purchase Russian LNG and pipeline gas feeding the Russian army. Scott Bessent, yeah, I don't like that guy, but he's actually correct that Europe is sponsoring the war against itself. The Belgian Prime Minister says that EU is not in a state of war with Russia, but he is incorrect. There is a hybrid war ongoing already. Russia uses some of the sabotage attacks to harm European Union. They also launch drones. They intimidate Europe as they can without actual military confrontation. But it doesn't mean that there is no war. The Cold War is actually also was called a war. So I would say that it's the new type of the hybrid confrontation between EU and Russia. But some of the politicians, as you see, they're just blind and they cannot say the things as they are. Well, what we have here is the Russian shuttle oil fleet tanker Ursus Maritinus. Now it carries the Turkish flag somehow. It was attacked near the Russian port of Taman, and you can see some of the damages to the tanker itself. It was empty, but was parked to be refueled by the oil. And as you may see, judging on a very high water line, it still goes empty. It was spotted near Turkish coast today and this video was shared. It sustained some of the damages but still capable to go on its own power. However, it requires maintenance, maybe that's why it was moved to Turkey for now. There's the damage to the main construction together with the captain's bridge. And just to remind you, this is how it happened. There was the huge fire on board that later on was extinguished. The country of registration is, after all, Liberia, and it was used to transport Russian crude oil, so it is in a sanction list. Right, we have the confirmation of successful use of Flaminga missile. It was capable to hit one of the Russian enterprise that produces the spare parts for the Russian fighter jets, like Sukhoi 35 or Sukhoi Su-30. The facility is located in Belgorod Oblast. The strike happened exactly 1 month ago, and finally today we have this confirmation about the damaged roof of the facility. Maybe Russians even cut it for repairs. That's why those holes they're square, but this one over here is definitely from the shell itself. So maybe facility is not working any longer. And this is the screenshot from the previous image. Then everything was intact, and now there are multiple of the holes in the roof. So maybe the precision of Flaminga missile is no longer the factor, but the missile itself is huge. The Neptune missile is more developed, but it uses very expensive components, unlike Flaminga. But Flaminga, it's like DIY-made cruise missile in some of the garage facilities, but Neptune requires definitely serial production and lots of the efforts and resources to build. That's why it's way more expensive, but at the same time more precise and more devastating for Russians. But sometimes Flaminga also could be successful, as we see. Well, yesterday I filmed a video about a new Ukrainian defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov. Here he is on the left, very young, he is even younger than me. And today he appointed one of the best drone specialists of Ukraine, call sign Flash, as his advisor. Fantastic news, and I see that the Ukrainian army may develop and reform quite fast. Under the ruling of the new defense minister, I see that the old Soviet school is fading away, and I also think that Commander Syrskyi and Fedorov, they will not find the common sense between each other, and I think that Syrskyi will finally resign. I believe in that, and it will happen, I guess, this year. All right, Russians are moving out their forces from one of the Syrian bases because the government forces are moving to take control over it. And they say that they will not accept the Russian presence there. Well, still Russia remains in some of the bases in Syria, but from this one they're taking their equipment out. This video was shared how Russian transport airplanes are taking all of the equipment together with helicopters, air defense, and so on. The base is located at the very northeastern side of the country, Kamishli International Airport base. So this part of Syria is being controlled by Kurds, but now government forces are moving in, pushing them away. But there were some of the negotiations, I guess, and Americans, they stopped supporting Kurd forces. Yeah, it was also the presence of the American forces here. Yeah, in Syria, everything is mixed, lots of the influence from whatever side, but luckily now it's not as hostile as it used to be with Bashar Assad in power. And here's the abandoned Russian military base. We have this report from one of the military correspondents.
Enter this Russian base here in Kamishli, northeast Syria, after it was abandoned by Russian forces about 2 days ago, according to local Kurdish security forces.
Yeah, interesting.
Bashar al-Assad invited Russian forces to come defend him against a Sunni-led uprising.
Looks like the gym, yeah, some of the gym equipment like here.
Here's the other Russian base where you still see the...
Yeah, still Russian flag, but it seems like the forces are being already evacuated. So that video of the Russian cargo plane, I think it was filmed a few days ago. Now, probably no Russian presence if she say that the base is being abandoned. Well, there is some sort of the equipment, but maybe it's too heavy to take away.
And Ahmed al-Shara, the current interim president of Syria, took over. Shara is a former al-Qaeda militant who's now been embraced by the international community and whose forces are now engaged in conflict with the Syrian Kurdish forces who have now taken over this base.
So for now, Kurds, they keep control over this base. But the Syrian official government, they want to get rid of Kurds. It seems like not, I think, of the Kurdish people, but of the Kurdish forces. I wonder if it might escalate. You never know. It's Syria. It's a very complicated place. More from the Middle East, we have this post published by the Embassy of the United States of America in Baghdad. It says, we are watching Iran very closely with Donald Trump black and white image. Well, there is the air carrier within the range to perform the attack operation on Iran, but it's just a single air carrier, and maybe this operation could be conducted, but together with Israeli forces. I think to support rebels in Iran, it's too late because Iran used significant brutal force against protesters, and according to the latest information published by independent sources that have access to the data from the hospitals, roughly 30,000 people were unalived because of the government actions to seize down those protests, to basically unalive their own people. By the way, the contact was lost with lots of the foreigners who stayed in Iran by the time the protests sparked. Chinese top general was detained. His name is Zhang Yus. It's very interesting because he was like this right hand of Xi Jinping. The Washington Post published a huge article about this one, and not just this military official was detained, but also other senior generals of the Chinese army. This guy was not just the ordinary general commander, he was the top elite of Chinese Communist Party. His father, and by the way, the father of Xi Jinping, they took the part in the communist revolution in China before. This guy has been accused of sending some of the nuclear secret documents to the United States of America about the nuclear program of China. Well, it's hard definitely to tell what happened there. Some of the information is coming about the possible military coup that failed, the information about the planning planning of the coup was shared to Xi Jinping personally, so there were traitors in this planning of the operation. There was some shooting. Well, at least this information is published in some of the legacy media, but de facto it is hard to confirm. Mostly it is coming from one questionable source without any sort of the proofs. You know, this China top rank system of the Communist Party, it's very closed, and it's hard to find out what exactly happened. But what we may say for sure, that the Chinese military command is beheaded by some sort of the internal confrontation within Communist Party, so they're not capable to attack Taiwan in this state. It's impossible for any army to operate with the change of the command right away, so this year for sure China will not perform its special military operation against Taiwan. It's 100%. And is it the start of some of the internal repressions? Well, absolutely, could be. It reminds 1930s of the Soviet Union. Then Stalin repressed the main command of the Soviet Army, Red Army. He also repressed designers of the aircraft and other military. So what he did, he basically weakened the Soviet Union right before the Second World War, and later on he had to release commanders, generals, and everyone from the prisons to somehow save the Soviet Union. Korolev, who is this designer of the Soviet missiles, who launched the first man to the space, Yuri Gagarin, yeah, he flown to the space, but the missile itself is being created by Korolev, so Korolev spent lots of the time being repressed in a prison. Could it be the same with China? Maybe. Xi Jinping is like this new Stalin, I guess. He is very harsh even towards his close circle, because this general, he was definitely the right hand of Xi Jinping, very close to him, very, very close. So the only one guy is the lucky one for now, Zhang Shengmin. Okay, so he's there, the rest were detained, arrested, and they've been incriminated of betrayal, so there is the highest penalty possible, of course, in China for them. About the Tomahawk missiles, we have the article from the Kyiv Post. They say that the talks are still ongoing, quietly, behind the curtains, for example, with Pete Hegseth personally. Well, I think that there could be some of the solution about Tomahawks, maybe even this year. It depends. Everything depends on Trump, really. And also on the number of the ground launchers. As we know, United States, they produce some of the ground launchers. The last year they presented the prototypes, so maybe they're gonna send a couple of them just to test in Ukraine. I don't see that Tomahawks could be really decisive for Ukraine without the huge number of the ground launchers. But they simply do not exist in the stock, so they require this political will to call for the massive production, upscale right away, but it's not happening for now at least. So if we speak about this upscale production, it's not the question of this year, but this year, first units could be developed and maybe even sent to Ukraine. We don't know because Trump is unpredicted, or it's better to say unpredictable, but his circle is very pro-Russian oriented, like for example Vitkov himself. And Donny likes dictators like Putin. He accepted Putin in Anchorage, Alaska with a red carpet, so it tells a lot. It definitely tells a lot. Boris Pistorius, a defense minister of Germany, said that Zelensky is speaking out of depression in Davos. Then Zelensky accused Europe of being weak. So Pistorius disagrees with that. He says that Europe is not capable of defending itself is wrong. Controversially, we are capable of doing so, and we are becoming stronger. At the same time, Mark Rutte, who is a NATO secretary, thinks otherwise. He went to Brussels and told EU lawmakers that Europe cannot defend itself without the United States. And he framed European self-reliance as unrealistic, warned that trying to build separate European structures would complicate things. But what choice the European Union has if there is the threat from one NATO member to another NATO member, verbal threat, posts, and also intimidation with the possible tariffs from the United States of America. It was towards Greenland, right? Towards the Kingdom of Denmark. So Europe should come out with its own independent army. I think Mark Rutte here plays in favor of Donald Trump, and he is very flattering with Donny. Maybe it's his policy right now because he understands that NATO is very dependent on the United States as well as the European security. But I would agree with Zelensky because Europe actually showed its weakness with those Russian drone attacks, with Russian escalation using fighter jets in Estonian airspace. Plus, Europe continued to purchase some of the Russian fossil fuels, and they promised to stop it from autumn of 2027. It's very far away, guys, very far away, more than a year. 1 year, 9 months at least. And who knows what might happen next? Maybe some of the Orban-like parties could win in France or Germany. AfD is very popular right now, so we don't know. We'll see. But Europe, of course, should act, and it should come out with its own European army that should also be the part of NATO. It should not be like very separate. It should be this organism of the commonly controlled army by high-rank officials from different states of the European Union, like it is with European Commission or European Parliament, whatever. So they have those bureaucratic systems for economy, but they don't have those for military, which is kind of strange. Yeah, AfD wants to return the cooperation with Russia. Zelensky should pay for blowing up Nord Stream, says Vedel, the head of AfD, and Orban confirmed that. That's right. So you see this urbanization of Europe is happening. Also the Czech Prime Minister, all of those populists who use and speculate on sensitive issues and questions, they take the power. And why they're being supported by this PayPal mafia, by Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, I mean those crazy populists, because they will destroy Europe or European Union from within. And for the United States of America and also for Russia, it would be easier to negotiate with separate countries because, for example, Hungary under Viktor Orban is very pro-Russian, so they're against sanctions, against supplying of the weapons for Ukraine for defense. Very profitable leader for Russia. And Orban also is a very close ally of Donald Trump. So ideologically, Donald Trump and Putin, they're very, very close, together with those kind of the puppet politicians and populists in European Union. Sadly, they're getting more votes right now. It's like a perfect storm for the European Union. They have threats from everywhere and also from within. And those populists, if they win, they will open the access for the foreign capitals to go to European Union. The fact that they will ruin the European production and the European markets. That's the goal of Elon Musk. That's why he supports radical politicians, to destroy the system and to build a new one based on his principles, and for the government to play less role in the regulations, for the corporations to stay on top. Now Elon Musk could be fined. There is the case even open against Grok by the European Union Commission because of the nudity that Grok may publish. But if Elon Musk is on top, if he establishes his own control via support of some of the crazy politicians, he would never be fined by European Commission. European Commission would not exist in this case. In case those populists, they will achieve victories in the main economies of Europe, like for example Germany or France. Yeah, that sounds kind of dystopian, but it is true. It is what is happening.
And if anyone thinks here, again, that the European Union or Europe as a whole can defend itself without the US, keep on dreaming. You can't. We can't. We need each other.
Well, maybe Rutte is saying that for United States not to give up NATO because he himself established this private connection with Donald Trump, kind of flattering, as I mentioned already before. So maybe it's like one of the variants to speak with Donald Trump like that, and to avoid escalation, at least between NATO members. Well, I know I've been quite critical to Rutte, but after all, he's a very experienced politician. He knows how those things work. So maybe he's behaving like that, and he proclaims what he proclaims just to achieve some special goal. At least I saw it in his recent policy, because he calls Trump daddy, and Trump likes that a lot, and he all the time says that NATO calls me daddy, so I like NATO. So maybe it's his strategy. He knows how to act and what to say. Because unfortunately Donald Trump is like this adult boy, he understands just personal connections, and compliments are playing the great role. That's why also Putin is kind of effective in communicating not just with Trump but also with Vitkov, and Vitkov is delivering those compliments to Donald Trump. You might recall this picture of Donald Trump that was presented to Donny by Putin via Vitkov. Complete cringe, but Donald Trump mentioned that and he likes this stuff. He even shows the photo of him together with Putin. That is how important this flattering really is.
The legend.
Glad to meet you again.
Legend. I can recognize your voice now. Better than any voice on the earth.
I'm flattered.
Better than any voice on the earth.
Thank you.
Vitkov is so happy. He's so good with translator. Russian freaking translator. I can recognize your voice better than any other voice in the world. Just imagine, it was his 7th visit to Moscow. 7th visit. And he never visited Kiev, by the way. Just imagine how much time he speaks with this Russian translator. And it seems like he is not using the American translator, maybe to avoid possible leaks. Who knows, but it is clearly a business interest more than attempt to resolve the war in Ukraine. Well, it's just my opinion, but I think most of the people, they agree with that. Alright, so France here. France opposes European Union plan to buy British Storm Shadow for Ukraine. Funds should be used to boost the bloc's domestic defense industry. Okay, so France probably has this competition. They have Scalp missile, which is exactly the same as Storm Shadow, so they want European money to be used to produce European weapons. I don't think it's like a huge obstacle for Ukraine to obtain those cruise missiles. I think that French factories will produce Storm Shadow. It's not a big question, it's not a betrayal or something. As many of the media sources now say, well, if France is the European Union and the money are spent by European Union, if there is an alternate within this bloc, of course, the money should be spent for French military production. That's, of course, if they will make it very fast, because Ukraine needs those missiles from UK, from France, doesn't matter, but if you decide to produce it in France, go for it, but do it as fast as possible. And I see some of the positive news coming from Germany. For example, Rheinmetall alone will be capable very soon to produce 1.5 million artillery shells per year. It is even more than artillery shell production in the United States of America. So Europe really invests a lot into its military. Well, now it's still at the beginning stage. It's the forecast for 1.5 million, but the change is happening. And it was triggered by threat from Russia and by the United States threats as well towards the NATO bloc itself, towards the Denmark kingdom. And of course, Europe, it wants to be more independent, as well as some of the neighbors of the United States, like, for example, Canada. Guys, for more news, I'm gonna update you tomorrow, and thank you so much for making this content possible with your kind support on Patreon and membership of the channel. Thank you so much. And also, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the channel to boost it in algorithms. Thank you so much for that as well. My friends, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.